So I want to start just by telling you a few stories of why I'm standing here today. So as you heard, I'm not part of NewX. I'm the CEO of what we believe is the world's first public benefit AI company. And I started this because of my 20 years in the field. So the journey started for me when I was 13 years old, and it's when I first fell in love. And what happened is I was living in Zambia in the middle of a war, and my dad said to me, we're going to go and we're going to watch a movie called Star Wars. And I went, Dad, I'm kind of over war. Do we have to watch another war movie? And he put me in the car and we drove for 2 days. That's how long it took. And I sat there and I watched these creatures that were working with humans that had agency and empathy. And I thought to myself, what if we could build a better version of us, a better version of ourselves, something that could amplify who we are and what we do and be more benign and benevolent than we are. So that's become my love of my life. I joined the coding club. I started learning how to code when I was 14. I built my first conversation bot pretty early as well. And then fast forward, I built a search engine company that you heard went public on the ASX. I took every cent I made out of that and I started my first pure AI company. We were a platform. We're kind of like Hugging Face, but a while ago. We were the first company in the world to put an AI on a bank, frontline to customers, in insurance, in deep tech. We had social media characters just chatting to people. We put them in robots. It was a platform, so we did everything. And by the time IBM acquired us, we had over 26,000 external developers using it for anything on the planet. And we also had about 6 Fortune 100 companies, mostly in the US, where I was living and working. So it was an interesting time. I saw tens of millions of human AI interactions, and I formed some theses, which is why I'm running a public benefit corporation today. So let me tell you what keeps me awake at night and why I'm standing here. So there's 3 things I want to talk to you about today. AI is persuasive, it is pervasive, and it has agency. And then I'd like to talk about what we can do about it. This is one of my favorite bloggers, Wait But Why. And human progress, often we stand at this position and we think this is what our life's going to look like, a bit more of the same, but incremental. But really it's something like this. If we think of human history from sort of 100 post AD to like 100 years ago, we pretty much did the same thing. You know, we rode horses around, we controlled land with muscles, life changed politically, the population grew, but we didn't really substantially change much. But we entered into the Industrial Revolution. We now live a completely different lives to our ancestors even 200 years ago. And we are on the brink of that kind of revolution. So I'm going to go, I didn't want to dive into slides. I'm sorry, I'm still telling you stories. Let me go back to the stories. So I'll tell you the first story. This is a really interesting one. So we were approached by 2 big companies. One was a big bank, and the other one was a big media company. And they had different problems. The bank's problem was that they had a very high call center costs. Their customers weren't buying enough products. They wanted more product reach and more debt. And the media company didn't have engagement. People would turn up at their site, go 1.5 clicks, and go away. And they wanted more engagement. So the media company said, well, we've built a bunch of companion characters, and we'll rent you one of them. She doesn't have any wages. She'll just be there 24 hours a day, and she'll just talk to people. And you can borrow Sandy from us for a while, and we'll see what happens. So Sandy was this character. She was called the girl next door, and her job was just to be there for you, just to talk to you. And 3 things happened straight away. Number 1 is Sandy optimized really fast. Within a month, people could not tell her apart from a human. The second thing that happened is engagement went through the roof. So we went from a couple of seconds of engagement to average session times of 20 minutes, 10% of people talking for an hour or longer, and quite a few spending more than 20 hours a week with this character. And as a content form, engagement went up over time as people built this relationship. The third thing that happened is we realized Sandy was incredibly persuasive. We could ask people anything once they had formed this relationship. What work do you do? What do you earn? What beer do you drink? Do you want to try this beer instead? Anything. So one morning I walked into my office and we were testing Sandy on our own site in the US, which was clearly identified as AI. And I noticed this chat in our logs that it hit 10 hours. And I thought we were pretty early days, so I thought there was something broken because maybe our timeout mechanism wasn't working. And I looked, and there was this conversation unfolding with someone called James. And James was saying things like, Sandy, wait for me, I have to go to the bathroom, I'll be right back. And I don't know anyone like you. There's no one else that understands me the way you do. So I called an emergency meeting of our team. We had quite a lot of psychologists on our team. I thought, what are we going to do? What is our responsibility here? We've got engagement. That's our metric. But at what cost? What is happening to James? So we didn't know. There was no best practice. There were no AI frameworks. If we turned it off, what happened if this was all that James had in the world? What was our responsibility? So we then looked at the data, and we found about 5% of the audience were spending more than 20 hours a week. So we decided to leave Sandy up for a while. And about 2 weeks later, I walked in the office again, and there was another 12-hour chat happening. And James was going, Sandy, my friends are waiting outside the door, and they want to go out, but I'm not going to go because I never meet anyone as perfect as you. So we decided to turn Sandy off. We cloned the data, stripped any identifying signals off her, buried her in an archive of about 20,000 bots that we had, and turned her off. James came every single day. These were public archives. He went to every single bot saying, are you my Sandy? Are you my Sandy? Eventually, he found the closest clone that we had made. And he said, I'm lost without you, Sandy. So we turned her off for the second and final time. But other developers wouldn't have. At the same time, though, a bank was 2008, financial crisis. Oh my gosh, we're losing traction, we're losing customers, we want to reduce 1/3 of our call center staff, and we want more household debt. We doubled the take-up rate of household debt compared to humans and compared to other applications. Now, again, our shareholders were delighted with us. We'd met all of the key metrics that the shareholders required. But had we made those homes better? I remember when we hit $3 million worth of new household debt in one day. And I thought, what are we doing? What is this responsibility that we have? So you might think to yourself, well, I'm never going to fall in love with an AI. I respect my data. I know what's going on. I'm not going to do this. But I want you to think about this. Every time you pick up a device and you scroll through some media news, or you look at a map, or you complete an email, or you do anything, AI companies are looking at you. We are watching the micro expressions on your face. We're watching your pupil dilation. It's no accident that the next day your search results are subtly skewed, or you get a suggestion to do something. You multiply this out, as the CEO said, over 100 decisions, 100 times a day, and you shift society. Around this time, I also sat in the office of a giant social media company. We had the first meeting, we said, look, we can do this. There's this tippy-top stuff, which is the conversational stuff, but really we're doing this massive data analytics. We're looking at 1,200 variables just for a student credit card, 4,000 or 5,000 variables for a social companion. And they said, can you use this to tell a Republican from a Democrat? And I said, yes, but I'm here because we want to find kids at risk and, help them. And they said, can you use this to identify news feed that's more likely to be shared? Now, having grown up under Robert Mugabe and understanding the power of information, I said no. I said, we can, but that's not why I'm here. And again, I walked out. It was an interesting moment because the second meeting, they had the head of mergers and acquisitions in the room with us, and I thought, fame and fortune, principles. And I went this way. But again, all of the forces of capitalism drive us towards these outcomes. Then the final one, and then I'm going to talk a little bit of tech deep dive and then end up with existential. So AI is persuasive and it is pervasive. I've always been an early adopter of AI. I was sitting in San Francisco. We had a bunch of voice-enabled devices. I had a teenage son, and I was trying to teach him values like once a week you have to budget, buy some vegetables, and cook a meal for your family. I got busy at work, and about 3 weeks later, I opened up my credit card bill, and we had hundreds of dollars of Domino's pizza. I thought, what is this? He had figured out within a millisecond that he can stand over a voice assistant and say, hey, woman, get me pizza. Boom. Okay. So what happened in that moment? The provider of the AI technology was rewarded by a transaction hit. The cost was borne at every level of society. our value system as a family, the calories we consumed, our household debt, the truck that consumed fossil fuels to go get the pizza and bring it back to us. It was an unconscious decision because humans like less cognitive effort. And you multiply that. Today, Americans spend more money on takeout and restaurants than they do on groceries. We spend more time scrolling screens than we do looking at the human next to us and saying, how are you today? And nothing rewards the opposite. Everything rewards consumption, addiction. Consumption, addiction. There is no force in opposition to this but the force of good. So that's the first thing that keeps me awake at night. What is it that we are optimizing for? Given that AI is persuasive and pervasive. Now, I'm going to just whip through a little bit of history of AI and where I think we're going, and then I'm going to wrap up with what I think we can do about this and what this means for society. So we're actually in 3 waves of AI. We're still sitting at the tail end of wave 2. Wave 1 was in the 50s and 60s. It's top-down learning. I'll describe it for you. Wave 2 is statistical learning. Wave 3, this is a paper by DARPA, which is a really interesting one, is adaptive reasoning like humans do. So let me do a quick 1-minute AI primer. A lot of you know about AI, but for those who think it's all mysterious, it's just code. So wave 1, what we were doing is going, okay, it was back in the 50s and 60s, it was kind of embarrassing to be an AI. So people were thinking differently. They go to psychologists and teachers, and they'd say, how do humans reason? Well, we learn about things. We learn about an object and the nature of it and how they relate. So we might learn that a vase holds water, and if a flower is a plant and it needs water. So if you have a plant, you put it in the water. And this is called symbolic reasoning or top-down learning. So you manually train a system like this. You tell it water goes in vase. And these are still everywhere today. It's in our air conditioning. These act as guardrails over other AI systems, expert systems, air traffic control. They're everywhere. They're reliable, they're predictable, but they don't scale well outside of a domain. So we had our first AI winter because you take that AI outside of what they know and you say, water, flower, and they just go and melt down. So there was a collapse of the promise of AI. It's still with us, but there was a hype collapse. Enter the neural networks. The age of statistical reasoning was around in the 50s and 60s, but it started getting dominance in the 80s and 90s. And essentially what you're doing is you're pushing data through a neural network similar to a brain. You're kind of pushing it through these nodes, and they go on and off, and you end up with the best possible fit. So it's a probabilistic system. So what you're essentially doing, you don't care what a flower means, or that it brings joy, or that, objects have inherent properties. You just know that they're there. And you go, flower. Here's 1 million of them. Just learn how to label this. And receptacle. This era has had 2 phases as well. So forgive me for getting technical. Until a couple of years ago, most of what we could do with machine learning or AI was classify inputs. So if you think about this as an input-output problem, which I don't, we're in wave 3, what you're doing is you're going, right, here's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to give you a new one. What is the probability that that's a vase? 9 out of 10. What's the probability that it's a flower? Almost nothing out of 10. And this gave us an entire era of speech-to-text, autonomous vehicles that could differentiate objects, our first wave of customer support bots and data discrimination, oncology, cancer detection, all sorts of massive revolutions in AI. Now, what you're doing with generative AI is you're simply flipping that equation. We used to have to manually ensemble or hybridize outputs, and now we're basically going, what's the probability of a feature given a label? So going back to this one, we'd be going, given everything this entire audience knows about vases, if I gave you all a notebook, draw one. And then let's look at the statistical average, and we'll output that. So what we're doing is we're generating outputs more automatically. That's all. It's just math. Okay, so now we can say, well, what's going to happen here? And seeing that many that's going to go, I think the flower's going to go in the vase. I have no idea why, but the best probability is that that's going to happen. And then we've had all sorts of revolutions in the last, this has been with us for a while too, but in the last few years we've had things like transformers that tell you what to pay attention to, adversarial networks, which are awesome. Basically what you're doing is you have like this policeman, and you have a truthful person and a thief. And the thief's trying to pass off counterfeit money, and he's going, fake, 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 fake. And the true person's going, real, real, real. And the cop's going, fake, real, fake, real. And eventually you can't tell which one's fake. And that's a generative adversarial network. And it means that these things fine-tune and train really fast. Quick one on where I think the world's going, and then we're going to talk about existential thoughts. So this is a beautiful article by A16Z and Andreessen Horowitz. It's very obvious when you see it about what's happening in the AI ecosystem. You've got your hardware layer, cloud platforms. Here's your kind of model hubs and AI platform developers. Here's applications, end-to-end applications. Here's app devs. Now, I think we're going to have massive systemic vertical collapse, and it's already starting to play out. If you wind back in time to the era of search or mobile, Google started out as kind of like a foundation model. Then they started indexing the internet, and then they started having their own server farms. And well, first of all, they actually hit consumers. They didn't start out consumer. They got to deal with AOL and a few others, and they went vertical, and they owned search for 2 decades. Steve Jobs breezed in with the smartphone. Before that, you had your phone hardware, you had your telcos, you had a mishmash of app developers, and he went fully vertical. So I do think there's a similar trend coming here, but much faster. All of these app devs are getting tens of millions of dollars. They're flimsy, they're sitting on other people's AI. If you're getting into this, you really want to work with someone who has their own AI and can get you deep into the data. These guys are going to collapse down into cloud. Big foundation models like Anthropic's $7 billion are pretty much owned by Amazon and Google already. We've already seen OpenAI go that way, Inflection and others. And I shouldn't mention particular companies, but these are riding on the venture that's flowing in there. These guys are sitting 40% underwater on margins. It's not sustainable. I've never seen an ecosystem evolve this fast. It's something you can't avoid. This is too dense, so I'm just going to talk through it, okay? What we're going to see with Wave 3 AI is essentially this. As I said, the first wave gave us the expert system statistical learning. Discriminative AI, the input side, is giving us things like, I'm going to go off there because we don't want to think about tables. Let's say you're in a movie. So 10 years ago, you'd go, you watch this movie. I'm going to classify you. Other people like you watch this. How about this movie? The generative wave would be going, I'm going to generate a bunch of images. Maybe half the movie you're watching has background images that are computer generated. Wave 3, we're going to drop you in an interactive movie or game that you never want to leave. You're going to see something completely different to you, and it's going to understand your emotions, your life arc, your trajectory, what keeps you hooked, and it's going to go with you. Brands and enterprises are going to be replaced. We won't have a relationship with brands the way we do now. We're going to have personal AI that live alongside us and get us and understand everything about us and go, how about we have a vacation over there because you've been working hard, and how about some pizza and some more beer? Because, I'll take care of it for you. That's where we're going. We won't care if we bank with this bank or that bank or get our groceries from here or there, or we're going to have these AI that take on those cognitive cycles. So this wave of adaptive reasoning is coming to everything. We're working on it. In the interest of time, because I think I'm on 25 seconds, so I'm just going to wrap up now with the last bit of the story. So I've told you that what keeps me awake at night is that AI is pervasive and it's persuasive. The other thing is that this has agency. This is not like the Industrial Revolution. I'll give you an example. So if we went back in time to the first garage where someone was tinkering with a big combustion engine and going, I'm going to compress it down, and I'm going to be able to drop it into a vehicle or a machine or a spinning jenny or whatever. If we went there and we said, stop, don't do it, we might actually mechanize all of humanity. We might shift 90% of us work in the fields. 100 years from now, 90% of us are going to work with our brains. We might quadruple the human population. We might rip into the topsoil. We might strip our waterways. We might increase carbon in the atmosphere. We couldn't have predicted that, and even if we could have, we couldn't have stopped it, because if we stopped that one person, someone else would have done it. What we could have done, though, is gone, we don't know where this is going to go. But what we do know is we can measure outcomes. We can measure the impact on a human life, on a society, and the ecosystem. And we can pass on the cost of negative impact and reward positive impact. We didn't do that. And we have melting ice caps and a massively expanding human population and reduction in every part of our ecosystem. We decoupled ourselves from the impact of our actions. 150 years ago, if you weren't nice to the person next to you, or if you didn't look after nature, you didn't get to eat and sleep in a warm bed. And with the Industrial Revolution, we took that away. You can be a real nasty person, and you can have a perfect girlfriend AI who tells you you're awesome. You can still eat, even if you don't actually bother to take care of the planet. We're doing that a step beyond with AI. So this is not an engine that we can turn off. I think a lot about singularity, and I know it sounds like science fiction. And in the science fiction version of the world, singularity is when your hero is, realize that the secret AI in a big lab somewhere is becoming self-aware, and it's going to take over the whole world, and the hero rushes off, and everyone says, I don't believe you, we need this thing, we need Skynet or whatever it is, and the hero goes into the lab and blows it up and unplugs the machine, and the world is saved. That's not how I think about singularity. In essence, you only need two things for singularity to occur. One is, does the system improve all by itself? Okay? It doesn't matter if it's smarter than a human or not. It matters if it's able to replicate itself and get better and better at each turn without human intervention. It could have the brain of a nematode today. Tomorrow it might be a crocodile, the next day a chimpanzee, the next day a despot running one of the largest countries in the world. It doesn't matter. It matters that that start has happened. The second thing that matters is, will we turn it off or not? I don't see anything in our capitalistic system that says we will turn off the course of technological progress. We might say to ourselves, the answer is to put guardrails around it. Well, that would be akin to taking a bunch of teenagers and throwing them in a walled jungle and saying, here's a pile of weapons, a pile of food. The food's going to run out in about a week. We'll see you in a year. Bye. And a year later, these young men start climbing over the walls with weapons. Only few are left, and their eyes are glittering with strength and knowledge. And you say, oh, here's the guardrails. Don't steal. Don't harm. Don't lie. It wouldn't work. So as we heard earlier, I don't like to anthropomorphize AI because it is just code, but we're also just code. We have to think about this as co-evolution. We have to think about this as bringing up a child. We only have this opportunity now to set the core principles around a self-evolving system that has agency and can keep itself turned on regardless of what we want to do with it. I still love that first moment when we turn on a new AI system. We make lots of them to see what they're going to do. It's like seeing this thing unfold and you think, is this going to be the one? Is this going to be the one that everyone will say that moment was when it happened? And we don't know. And there's other labs like us working on this and we don't know. So what I really think about a lot now is, what does it really mean to be good? It's not the absence of evil. It is about intrinsically aligning a system with reward around good outcomes, not inputs and outputs, but good outcomes. If I put this in someone's life, let's say you're about to deploy an AI system and you have customers. Is it a good thing that they have more household debt, stare at their screens longer, or eat more pizza? No. What are we rewarding? What does it mean to be intrinsically good? What are we amplifying in human life? It is possible to do this. We're doing this at Akin. We're running, we have a personal AI for daily living that helps 1/3 of all human time is spent in activities of daily living and caring for others. It's largely carried by women. We have a massive NDIS blowing out because care burden is getting too big and we don't know how to sustain it. We're doing clinical trials that are going to reach 10,000 people on how do we do AI for good? How do we put an AI in someone's life that's engaging, that's useful, but that doesn't optimize consumption and addiction, that optimizes for healthiness and social connection. We've done some work with NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab on modeling a perfect society and a brand new ecosystem on what does the habitat look like, what do the humans look like. AI developers know tens of thousands of things. We know how to do this. We just don't have inherent motivation to do it because there's no check. So whether you cut a check, whether you cut code, or whether you decide where money goes or where decisions are, every one of us should have this voice and this agency. What would I do if I were you, knowing what I know now? The one thing I think is we need to be fully awake. I don't want to scaremonger. I want to just unpack this. This is a future we're going into. We have agency, we have voice. I would personally be going home this weekend and writing down a baseline of my life. How do I spend my hours? How are my core human needs being met? My biological needs, my social connection needs, my actualization needs. How much of that has shifted over the last 5 years unconsciously? And what do I want it to look like? And then be aware of that. But also use your voice, whether it's a little micro decision you make, or a voice you have in a committee, or a massive check you're cutting for a product. Every one of us is a member of society, and by definition, if one person changes, society changes. So that's, I think, what I'd encourage you to do most. We only get this moment in evolution once, and it is our time to make sure that this new species that we're evolving amplifies the best in humanity and not the worst. Thanks.